Aqua Hipsters. Hey guys, this is Aqua Hipster here, and I've got something I've got to tell you guys, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. I've seen Star Wars The Force Awakens 3 times now in theaters, and I'm seriously debating going a fourth time. And I guess that shouldn't be all that surprising, especially if you know me, because I'm a huge Star Wars fan and nerd, I guess you could say. But what does surprise me is how divided so many people are on the quality of this movie, even among fans of Star Wars. And even though the mainstream reviews are currently very strong, with Rotten Tomatoes, I think, scoring it around a 94 and holding strong there are still a lot of fans who have really serious problems with Star Wars The Force Awakens. And what I'm going to do in this video is examine some of these criticisms and give you guys my thoughts on the latest installment in the Star Wars saga. So that's going to mean some massive spoilers ahead, so go ahead and stop the video now if you don't want to hear anything about the movie. Okay, so now that we took care of that, I'm just going to kind of go through the list here that I made and hit some of the highlights of people's complaints and criticisms. Other Star Wars fans have submitted to me that The Force Awakens is just a beat by beat rehash reboot of Episode 4, A New Hope. And in that same vein, even some of the most stalwart fans of the franchise have expressed some disappointment in the reuse of the Death Star trope with the Starkiller base. They're going, oh man, it's a third Death Star, not again. Oh, can't they think of something else? And not only this, but there's the way the Starkiller base was used. It didn't really succeed in making people feel emotionally invested in the 5 or so planets that were blown up by the super weapon of the First Order. You know, they claim that blowing up Alderaan in A New Hope feels much more significant and impactful than the destruction of the Republic in The Force Awakens. So, and I've also heard people complain that Supreme Leader Snoke, rendered in CG, looks pretty crappy, and he sticks out like a sore thumb compared to many of the practical effects used elsewhere in The Force Awakens. What else? People complained about the Rathtar scene with Han Solo. It's sort of a similar argument there, that the CG Rathtars didn't look that great and it felt out of place and kind of campy. Let's see. I've heard people complain that Han Solo dying wasn't a very big emotional payoff, since he just dies during a time in the movie when there isn't much time to mourn his death. So people feel like it wasn't a very proper send-off for a character who's as legendary as Han Solo. And last but not least, that final scene with Rey and Luke left a lot of audience members with more questions than answers about the state of the Star Wars universe. And people left the movie feeling a bit unsatisfied with how many loose ends are left to the plot of this new storyline. And I'm going to admit that at the end of The Force Awakens, when I first saw it in theaters, I had a lot of very complicated thoughts and feelings about the movie. I wasn't sure how to process it all. It was a lot. It was fast paced. It was 2 hours and 15 minutes of just go 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 action, thrills, comedy. All the stuff you love about Star Wars. It was such a spectacle and an adventure, and I really loved it. But at the end, when everybody started like yelling and clapping and cheering in the audience, I just kind of sat there quietly trying to process it and digest it, and it took me a little while, to be honest. Alright, so by now, you're probably getting the point that this movie's not perfect. It has flaws. But guess what? Every movie has flaws. I thought that The Force Awakens was terrific. I loved it, and as I mentioned, I keep going back to see it again and again and again. This film is leaps and bounds better than the prequel movies. Ugh, prequels. Ugh, shudder. Something that I want to point out is that when I was a kid and I went to see Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, I left that theater thinking, oh yeah, that movie was awesome. It had Darth Maul, it had pod racers. Man, that was awesome. And everybody in the theater was yelling and having a good time. And, I got so caught up in the excitement of everyone around me and the fact that the movie ended on such a high note that I didn't really stop to question whether or not it was actually a good film. But the more times I watched The Phantom Menace, and the more I thought about it as a standalone film, the more I realized that it sucks. Like, it is hot garbage. It really sucks. But in contrast, The more I see The Force Awakens, and the more I think about this movie and all of the different cinematic elements that are involved with it and have gone into it, the more I really like it. It is an excellent movie. All right, now I've given you my claim that The Force Awakens is an excellent movie, so now I need to back up that claim. And here's what I realized after several viewings of this film: the central unifying theme of The Force Awakens, unless I'm mistaken, but I'm pretty sure the central unifying theme is acceptance. And you can see acceptance like this theme in almost every character. Rey doesn't want to accept Anakin Skywalker's old lightsaber. Finn doesn't want to accept being part of the fascist, murderous First Order. Kylo Ren does not accept the call to the light side that tempts him. And I could go on, but the point is that nearly every element of The Force Awakens serves this central theme of acceptance. And so the fact that it borrows plot points and tropes from the original trilogy actually works. Because, and by the way, something I noticed is that The Force Awakens, it's not just a rehash of Episode 4, it actually borrows heavily from The Empire Strikes Back also, and also a little from Return of the Jedi. And that is not a bad thing. It helps the movie fit in with the original trilogy by using the Orig Tridge as a familiar backdrop that helps us feel like we're back in the Star Wars universe, and at the same time, that helps the new characters fit in and the new storyline fit in, but also it helps them stick out more against that backdrop. And so we all know after seeing the movie that the main protagonist of The Force Awakens is Rey. And the conflict of the film is meant to make the viewer focus on her and on Finn and on Kylo Ren, on these new characters. So also there's this dynamic in the movie too, which I think is really cool, between the light and the darkness, and it's symbolic of the duality of human nature. And this is the conflict that helps to drive the plot forward. You've got the opening scene with a bright shining moon or planet or some kind of heavenly body, I can't remember what it was, and it's in the sky, out in space, and then it gets eclipsed in the darkness by this huge First Order Star Destroyer that floats out in front of it. And then Kylo Ren gets introduced at nighttime, and Rey is also introduced, but on the desert planet of Jakku during the daytime. And by the way, I think using the Death Star trope again for the third time in the Star Wars saga is actually forgivable in this film, because Starkiller Base is actually a metaphor for what the dark side of the Force is doing to Ben Solo, aka Kylo Ren. It uses up his power by draining the light from his soul until Ben Solo disappears and all that's left is Kylo Ren. The dark side devours your soul the same way that Starkiller Base consumes the sun, consumes the light from the stars, which are the lights of the universe, and it's brilliant. And, people who think that it's a flaw to use Starkiller Base in this movie, in my opinion, they just don't understand what the movie is all about. I realize that I've rambled on for a bit too long now, but I wanted to point out just one more thing about that final scene between Luke and Rey on that island at the end of the movie. That ending is actually perfect when you consider the beginning line of The Force Awakens. There's an old man who says, "This will begin to make things right." And, that line is a tongue-in-cheek reference to what the prequels did to Star Wars as a franchise. The prequel movies, for a lot of people, ruined Star Wars. Some of my friends a few years ago told me, hey, I'm done with Star Wars. After seeing Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, that's the last nail in the coffin. These movies were a kick in the face to Star Wars fans everywhere. And yeah, but, on my third viewing of The Force Awakens, I understood that Luke Skywalker actually represents Star Wars fans. And in particular, the older generation of fans, the people who are fans of the original trilogy. And, just like Luke is all grizzled and jaded and depressed, and he's kind of turned his back on the Force and on the galaxy and just given up on the Force, we as Star Wars fans had given up, in a way, on the franchise of Star Wars after that train wreck that was the prequels. But then you have this spunky young woman who's strong in the Force, who just shows up out of nowhere, holds out his old lightsaber, and just holds it out to him, waiting for him to take it. And no words are spoken, but it's so dramatic. They're on the island, there's the ocean around them, and the camera's spinning around them, and they're just holding still with her arm outstretched like that, trying to hand him his lightsaber. And it's like she's saying, take the lightsaber again, Luke. Take up the Force again. Let it in when the Force is calling you. And just like Luke Skywalker, we as the old fans of the Star Wars trilogy, the original trilogy, are asked by the movie The Force Awakens, pick up Star Wars again. Put all those bad experiences that you had in the past behind you and let it in again. Feel that magic you felt the first time. And you know what? I don't know about you guys, but I accept. Star Wars is back, and I am thrilled. But, enough of my blabbering. I'm curious, have you guys seen the movie yet? What did you think of it? Do you agree with anything I've said or disagree? I was actually thinking, maybe the central unifying theme, instead of acceptance, it should be awakening. Maybe everybody's awakening, like that's what's really happening. So I might be wrong on that, but I'd love to hear your guys' feedback. I'm sure you've noticed other things that I may have left out. I'd love to hear from you. So until next time, Aqua Hipster out, and may the Force be with you. Peace.
Can't run the Empire. To all you beta haters out there, we'll blow your planet up.
What does thy bidding, my master?
It's a disaster, Skywalker we're after.
What if he can be turned to the dark side?
Yes, he'd be a powerful ally, another dark Jedi.
He will join us or die. We got Death Star, we got Death Star, we got Death Star, we got